Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mundane Matt, and when I was going to college, I always wanted to be part of a fraternity. I wanted that college experience, except I didn't have the grades or the money to go to school at a university. I went to a community college, and only one time at San Diego State University was I invited to pledge to a fraternity that was allowing community college members to go. At the time, I thought it was the coolest thing ever, but in retrospect, it pretty much made me realize that the frat was running out of money and they wanted my $100 a month in dues in order to keep their house afloat and not actually live in it. So I chose to not partake in that particular Greek life experience. But I'm not everyone, and sometimes it works out well, and well, sometimes it's outright tragic. And that's the story of this kid right here, 19-year-old Timothy Piazza, who was attending Penn State University, who was on the football team, and is, well, unfortunately dead after some hazing at a local frat. In fact, 18 members of that frat have now been charged in his death. So 18 Penn State fraternity brothers have been charged with crimes ranging up to involuntary manslaughter and the death of a pledge who authorities say fell repeatedly down a flight of stairs after he and others were made to run a gauntlet of drinking stations guzzling vodka, beer, and wine. Hazing in college campuses, especially when it comes to Greek life, is nothing new. But it should definitely be the job of the fraternity to monitor whether or not these kids have a tolerance level for it, or if they are going to put themselves in harm's way. Personally, I'm not against these kind of games if they're monitored correctly, but in this case, this is pretty fucking sad. Beta Theta Pi members resisted getting help for 19-year-old Timothy Piazza, causing him to suffer for hours and possibly making his injuries worse. This is coming from a prosecutor announcing the results of a grand jury investigation. They made this kid wait for hours. That's fucked up. They say that this is a very sad day for Centre County. It's been sad ever since we lost a child for reasons that were totally preventable. This coming from District Attorney Stacey Parks Miller, which is true. Everything that happened here was 100% preventable. And that is the saddest part of it. People just not paying attention or not wanting to get in trouble. And instead of facing the consequences, they let this kind of shit just fucking take, they just let it kind of play itself out. And now they find themselves with a dead person on their hands. 8 of the fraternity brothers and the chapter were charged with involuntary manslaughter. Other charges include aggravated and simple assault, evidence tampering, alcohol-related violations, and hazing. An attorney for the chapter didn't respond to messages seeking comment. The grand jury, aided by security camera footage, said the fraternity was heavily stocked with booze for the February 2nd ceremony at which Piazza, a sophomore engineering student from Lebanon, New Jersey, and 13 others accepted pledge bids. The pledges were pressured to chug vodka, shotgun beers, and drink wine. And again, this is when that old adage comes up, right? That, liquor before beer, all in the clear, beer before liquor, never been sicker. But here you've got them chugging vodka, shotgunning beers, and drinking wine. Wine is just sugary. You know what I mean? It's sugary, and working with the vodka and the beers is going to make these kids it's a cocktail for getting them fucked up. Is all it is. It says here Piazza tumbled down a flight of stairs that night and fell several other times, injuring his head. The next morning, he fell down the stairs again and was unconscious when help finally was summoned. He died February 4th as of a traumatic brain injury. So this kid fell down, hit his head, and they probably didn't know how bad it was, which is why they're getting hit with involuntary manslaughter. But that's fucked. That's so sad. Miller say that doctors estimate his blood alcohol level was nearly 0.40. Was Jesus Christ. That's given the fact that it's 0.08%, which is the legal limit, 0.4 is insane, especially in a 19-year-old. The investigation found that some frat members tried to conceal what happened. They found text messages recovered by police urging pledges to get rid of evidence of alcohol, and that conversations discussing deleting conversations from a messaging app were discovered. Okay, while this is, yes, covering up evidence, you got to look at it too from a kid's perspective, a young person's perspective. They're trying to like cover their ass. I don't agree with it. I'm not agreeing with it, but I'm always trying to understand why people do what they do, right? That's a big part of my take on a lot of these things, is I like to try to figure out why people do the things that they do. I like to understand why things happen the way that they happen. And I get it. I get why the kids are freaking out. They're like, holy shit, holy crap, oh my God, we've got to do something here. And so they're trying to just clean it up. But they're young and they don't realize that, you know, it only gets worse the more you try to clean it up. And that's what happened here. Piazza's father, Jim Piazza, blamed flagrant disregard for the law and said the death didn't have to happen. He's 100% correct. Sadly, we're never going to see a smile again except in pictures. Again, that must be 100% heartbreaking for that father to have a 19-year-old engineering student son at college and end up just, you know, dying from something that was entirely preventable. Now, Penn State did permanently ban Beta Theta Pi on March 30th, accusing it of a persistent pattern of excessive drinking, drug use, and hazing. University President Eric Barron called the report heart-wrenching, sickening, and incomprehensible. Now, okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing with this kind of stuff. Like I said at the beginning of this, I'm not 100% against hazing in terms of these fraternities. They are, you know, hazing exists in every aspect of our society in one way or another. However, the people running the Beta Theta Pi fraternity clearly were not paying attention, and this is negligent. I would say it's negligent above involuntary, because, you know, they've just, I don't know, I view it as negligent. Clearly grand jury wants involuntary. I'm not too sure if they're giving them a higher charge, knowing that they're not going to get a conviction. Very similar to the whole George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin. They went after him for second-degree murder when they had no evidence supporting second degree, but they could have gotten involuntary manslaughter on him and probably got a conviction. So again, it's one of those things where it's like the grand jury might be requesting a heavier charge, knowing that they can't get it actually to convict. So that's something to consider as well. He goes on to say, this would be University President Barron, "It is numbing how an atmosphere that endangers the well-being and safety of another person could occur within an organization that prided itself on commitment to each other and to its community." Well, you know, again, it's like, I think this kind of mindset when it comes to discussing fraternities is one that people... Look, fraternities are heavily glorified. As I kind of, you know, mentioned at the beginning of this thing with my particular little story, I wanted to join one. It was glorified. It was something, you know, you'd make brothers for life and you get connections and everything else. And so, you know, people go into it with that particular attitude, that particular mindset, that belief structure of what it is, mostly because of what we've seen through fraternities or of fraternities through pop culture. And so, you know, this was something where they should have acted. They chose not to act, and this is why it's more negligent than involuntary. So, also goes on to say that video footage was turned over to investigators that provided evidence of what occurred and contradicted stories that some witnesses had told. Okay. The cameras recorded Piazza drinking vodka and beer, and an hour later needing help to walk from an area near the basement stairs to the couch. Piazza is later shown trying unsuccessfully to open the front door and then severely staggering drunkenly towards the basement steps. Oh, ouch. Okay, so he fell down the basement steps. Those are usually like full bore concrete, not padded at all. Maybe this was wooden, but if he had that much of a traumatic brain injury, I'm going to argue that these things were concrete. He was found at the bottom of the steps after apparently falling face first. 4 brothers carried his limp body upstairs, where some poured liquid on him and one slapped him in the face. Fraternity members put a backpack containing textbooks on him so he wouldn't suffocate on his own vomit, which tells me that that is something that they've dealt with before, right? That they've dealt with somebody who has gotten so drunk that they're puking nonstop, and they have to do this as a way to look after them. And keep in mind, again, I want to stress the negligent aspect of my theory here, not involuntary, because the negligent part feels like it fits more appropriately with the situation just based on this evidence alone. There's probably more that's out there that maybe I haven't seen. I read a few articles about this. This is generally what went down. But it's something, again, that I just find to be interesting, because you have a boy who is drunk. He fell down a flight of stairs. He's limp. He's passed out. They think he's going to wake up and vomit. They don't want him to choke on his own vomit, probably because they've experienced something similar. So in their mind, they think, okay, put a backpack full of textbooks on him. That will keep him from rolling over. And this way we'll be able to make sure he's okay for the morning. This right there tells me that their intent was actually to look after him, because they probably didn't recognize, due to the excessive drinking and drug usage, that he had fallen and hit his head. Again, falling back on the negligent aspect of this. Now, it says here, when a brother insisted Piazza needed medical help, he was confronted, shoved into a wall. The report said when that brother insisted again that Piazza required help, he was told others were biology and kinesiology majors. I totally mispronounced that. So his opinion wasn't as valuable as theirs. Now, that is a problem. Okay, that is a problem here. I hadn't read that piece before, so I admit that. But this is an issue here where the one brother was like, okay, this dude needs help. Everyone else is like, no, fuck that shit. Other people's opinions are more valuable than theirs based on their major. And that is part of our society. That is one that I talk about a little bit when it comes to YouTube and YouTuber culture, right? And just to kind of deviate quickly into that particular path, what I mean by that, just to give you an idea, I have 136,000 some odd subscribers, okay? So someone might look at my particular subscriber count and think that my point of view is more important or valuable than let's say 75,000 subscribers. Whereas someone with, let's say, 200,000+ subscribers might have a user that looks at that person's difference of opinion than mine, and then look at our different subcounts and go, the person with 200,000+ subscribers clearly has a more valid opinion. It's not just relegated to frat life or Greek life or whatever. It is an aspect of society in these situations. The person who is the most popular kind of tends to have the more valid opinion. It's definitely a problem. And that is, again, something that is like, it's like a social pecking order. And in these particular situations, that tends to be, well, more followed than not. Sadly, the brother who said to the kid need medical help didn't actually call medical help. So then Piazza tried to get up later, but fell backwards and hit his head on the wooden floor. He also fell into a stone floor before being found in the basement hours later. So he fell again twice. And again, this is probably adding to the injury in his head. That's horrible that he was that fucked up and that they just didn't call help. Like, I'm totally on board with these dudes getting in trouble. They were negligent as shit. Timothy was lying on his back with his arms clenched tight at his sides and his hands in the air. This coming from the grand jurors. During the next 40 minutes, fraternity brothers shook him, tried to prop him up, covered him with a blanket, wiped his face, and attempted to dress him before one of them finally called 911. Yeah, he can't. They're trying to get him up. After a while, they realize something horrible has happened. But it makes me wonder, too, again, going back to the negligent part of this, how much of this particular thing, how many times over the course of how many years people are there, had they had these kind of pledge parties with someone getting this hammered, and then they, put a backpack on their back, making sure they can't get back up, that they kind of hold them down, they kind of let them sleep it off, everything else, right? It's one of those things where it's like you have to ask how many times this has happened. Now, when you go back to the previous point, though, about the guy wanting to call for medical help and someone shoving him against the wall and confronting him, that does away with any kind of real protection angle for looking after Timothy. This is more about them covering their own ass, as we've learned from them trying to get certain messages deleted and everything else. And that is a problem. But that is also the panic mode when it sets in. And again, young people drinking alcohol underage, panic sets. There's all these layers at play here when you think about it. And I'm not excusing or apologizing for anyone. I'm not saying they shouldn't be in trouble. again, it boils down to the mindset of trying to understand their mentality, why they did what they did, how they did it, what prompted them to do it. Because I think when we have that information, or have a solid working fundamental understanding of that information, it allows us a greater take on it. And that is what happens a lot, especially when going up with a judge and everything else. That will be taken into consideration. And I think it should be taken into consideration when you look at the court of public opinion. Sadly, information is never disseminated quite like that, and that can lead into a lot of crazy shit. Again, I'm not apologizing for these people, nor am I defending these people. I'm simply trying to understand. I just have to make that abundantly clear. Because sadly, even with YouTube, many people will interpret simply asking the question or trying to understand as either empathy and apologizing for them, and it's just not something that I'm trying to do. So it does say here that 10 of the defendants were arraigned on Friday, were released on bail. The remaining defendants will be arraigned this week. And that's sad, because this kid, man, had his whole life ahead of him. He had his whole life ahead of him, and he pledged a frat. And they had a hazing. And, it's sad. You look at him, he's like, looks so happy right there. Football jersey on, whole life ahead of him. And it's not there anymore. And I'm not trying to, get all high and mighty and say, oh, hazing is bad. Hazing happens in every form of society, regardless whether you want to believe it or not. It's just the truth of the way things are. But you look at a situation like this one, Penn State has already gone through a number of issues in terms of like the whole, Jerry Sandusky thing. Additionally, this particular part of Greek life has been under fire for quite some time. A lot of colleges have been looking for many reasons to get rid of Greek life, to get rid of the fraternities and the sororities. They're very much trying to end that angle of and I don't really call it Americana, but of the college experience. And you know what? You get a situation like this, and that is what happens. They look at it and they think to themselves, well, shit. This will allow us to finally strike that final nail in the coffin. And sadly, it came at if it does happen, it will be at the expense of a 19-year-old who just drank too much, and people got too afraid to call for help. And again, it's negligent, and it's crappy, and it shouldn't have happened, and they're going to have to pay the price with that. And that is going to be something that's going to follow these kids for the rest of their life. And to the parents of Timothy Piazza, I can only offer my deepest condolences and sympathies. That's just the truth of it. I mean, it's just, we live in a really messed up world where this kind of stuff happens when it totally shouldn't. But anyway, guys, what do you think about this? I'm very curious to know your thoughts. This is a tough situation to get through. There are many angles to look at it from. I don't argue or disagree with a grand jury wanting to charge these boys with this crime. I do, however, feel that involuntary is not the right crime. They have a better shot at getting convictions if they went through negligent. And that's just my take on it. And I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. My name is, of course, Matt Jarbo. This is the Mundane Matt channel. If you haven't already, please thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, check back often for more content from me. I wouldn't be here without you guys. So I just want you guys to know that I'm very grateful and appreciative that you guys are always coming and checking out videos. But right now, given the whole YouTube adpocalypse thing, things are getting pretty dire for the channel. If you guys can help out, that'd be fantastic. Patreon, PayPal, Amazon affiliate, anything will help keep me going. That's just what I want to say about that. All right, guys, have yourself a great day, and peace out.